A Republican who's running to become the top education official in South Carolina was debating the other candidates, and she said this incredibly ignorant thing.
Well, I do not support the South Carolina science standards that were adopted last year. And in fact, the South Carolina science standards that were adopted last year are a disguised set of Common Core next generation science standards that were pushed through illegally through our current administration. And that would be Dr. Zais through actually Sharmika Childs particularly. And in regard to the evolution issue, I have to say that that is one of the problems with our education system today, and it's one of the problems that has been brought to light through the problems with the Common Core standards, is that children are not receiving an objective education. There is plenty of science and research behind the theory of intelligent design, and yet it is not allowed in the classroom. There is no reason why the scientific theory of intelligent design should not be taught in the classroom alongside the theory of evolution. And that way children would receive an objective education, and they could also, for Christian children, could point to their God through the theory of intelligent design.
Thank you.
Children need to have an objective education in the public school classroom.
Irony! Yes, they do need to have an objective education in the science classroom, which is why you should never be in control of it. God, the scientific theory of intelligent design. That's not a scientific theory. That's not a scientific theory. You know what that scene reminded me of? Funny enough, I know it's totally not the same topic, but if you saw Django Unchained, when Leonardo DiCaprio, as he's playing the slave master, he's so convinced about how black people are inferior and they should be slaves that he brings out like the mannequin brain and he's showing it to Jamie Foxx and everybody else, and he's like, "The science of phrenology says," and he's talking about, phrenology is bullshit, pseudoscience that's not science at all. Just like eugenics, the idea of eugenics being correct, it's not correct. They would measure the size of people's noses and go, your nose is too big, you're inferior. The fuck does that have to do with anything, man? Totally made up, right? But they've convinced themselves, like, no, that's totally scientific. Phrenology, totally true. Eugenics, totally true. Intelligent design, it's a scientific theory. What are you talking about? It's totally scientific. Really? Then why is it that no scientist says it's scientific? You're the only one that's ever said it's scientific. It's so funny how they move the goalposts. Like, as time has gone by and as science and technology and medicine has gotten more and more advanced and the smart people are winning a lot of these battles, the stupid people have had to move the goalposts. So originally it was the earth is flat. Well, they couldn't say that anymore. Now they admit, the earth isn't flat. Then they talk about, the earth is the center of everything. Well, then we learn that the earth isn't the center of everything, not even the center of the solar system. The sun would be the center of the solar system. And they're like, then they say, okay, well, we'll drop that. Then it's, the world is 6,000 years old. They can't say that anymore. Most of them drop that, although there's some creationists and young earthers who, there's a few of them, but they exist, but they're going away, right? And then when they realize they can't teach creationism in the classroom, especially in the science class, because it's biblical, you can't put religion in the science class, that's insanity. Then you'd have to bring in, the religion of Islam and bring in Hinduism and Buddhism and whatever anybody thinks about, where the earth came from. Just teach it in the science class. Well, you can't do that. That's not fucking science, man. And now they've moved the goalpost to what they think is their most high-minded dodge yet, which is intelligent design. And you know what that argument is? It's the God of the Gaps argument, presented as if it's science. They say, we know that you think evolution is real, but hey, man, you don't have every single bone of every single fossil in the record, so you can't be sure that evolution is real, which means God had to intervene in multiple times and correct things. That's what intelligent design is. And it's totally bullshit. It's totally bogus. And we need to get to a point in the country where if somebody says something like that, it's a scandal. Where, like, Everybody's talking about it. It should be all over CNN. It should be all over every news channel. And they should say, okay, well, her chances are over because she said something incredibly, incredibly ignorant. Like, obviously, you haven't cared enough about these scientific issues, but you want to be the head of the science department? You want to be the head of education in the state? And you didn't care enough to fucking Google research this shit? Where you said intelligent design is science? It's not even close to science. Look, I've brought this up before, but just the argument that, hey, we look pretty designed, so therefore there must be a designer. It's one of the oldest religious arguments that there is. And, you know, it's the argument that they always use a watch. That's their specific example. Well, if there's a watch, that means there was a watchmaker. So, hey, if there's a person, they look designed, so there must be a person maker. That would be God. That's how they describe it. And I have to say that to people who haven't read about this topic or researched it or actually learned about the science or learned about logic, that might sound convincing. In fact, I thought it was the most convincing argument for a God before I actually researched this stuff and looked into it and read all the different points of view. And if you do that, you realize very quickly that argument is so wrong that it's its own fallacy. It's its own fallacy, and it's called the fallacy of passing the buck. So what does that mean? I've described this before on air, but basically what it means is, so even if you accept that logic, you accept that reasoning, that, hey man, we look really designed, so there must be a designer. We're so complex, so there must be some sort of designer. Okay, fair enough, let's accept that. Well then, by that same logic, whatever being, call it God, that created us and made us so intricate and complex and designed, well, obviously, by definition, that God would have to be superior to us, right? Right. Oh, they'd have to be much more complex and intricate than us, right? Right. They'd have to be much more designed than us, right? So therefore, who designed the designer? If this God is so powerful and so mighty and is able to create humans and give life, well, that's a really fucking complex, large, intricate being, right? So then, if you're saying we couldn't have came from nothing, then God definitely couldn't have came from nothing. So is there a super God that created a God? And is there a super God that created a super God that created a God? And it goes on ad infinitum. It goes on forever, right? And that's why they call it the fallacy of passing the buck. You think you're answering the question, but you're just posing a harder question. You're just passing the buck, passing the question down. So it's a silly argument. Look, the bottom line about the issue of evolution in the classroom and in the science class is that it's fucking science. We know it's real. We know it's right. We have a mountain of evidence to back it up. So to try to put something else in the conversation with evolution, whether it's intelligent design or creationism or anything, you're basically saying, let's teach non-science in the science class, which is absurd. It's like saying, let's teach about the Spanish-American War in math class. Why, if you're learning about fucking long division, what the fuck does the Spanish-American War have to do with it? It has nothing to do with that. You're putting something that doesn't belong in that classroom, which is stupid. If you want to have, in private schools, you want to do religious teachings and have religion in the religion class, of course, go right ahead. But this is public schools, and this is science. And you're seriously disadvantaging these kids by teaching them bullshit at a young age.